The air hung heavy over the Sundarbans that August morning, hot, thick, and unmoving. By mid-morning, the temperature had already soared past 90 degrees Fahrenheit. For 52-year-old Arun Chatterjee, a commercial photographer from Mumbai, it was the start of what he believed would be a defining day in his life's work. Armed with high-end equipment, a lifelong passion for wildlife, and an unshakable confidence, he had come to the dense mangrove forests of West Bengal in search of the perfect shot of India's most iconic predator, the Bengal tiger. Arun had spent decades capturing India's beauty, festivals, temples, cityscapes, but wildlife always tugged hardest at his heart. He'd been on safaris before, always cautious, always respectful to rules. But the Sundarbans weren't like the national parks he'd known. This reserve, with its maze of muddy trails and unpredictable terrain, was wilder, harder to control. And this morning, one tiger in particular was in no mood to be photographed. The tiger's name was Agneban, a 470-pound male with a reputation among forest rangers. Lately, he'd grown restless, charging vehicles more frequently and skipping feedings. Though the park staff had taken note, no changes had been made. The zone stayed open. At 9:45 a.m., Arun entered the restricted safari section of the park in a rented Mahindra Scorpio SUV. Signs in Bengali and English lined the route, warning visitors to remain inside their vehicles. But as Arun slowly approached a shaded clearing and spotted Agneban pacing near the trees, the excitement surged in his chest. This was it, the opportunity he'd been waiting for. For several minutes, Arun adjusted his camera through the open window, switching lenses and trying different angles. He was focused, methodical, but when he realized the zoom lens was in the trunk, he made a critical choice. The tiger, seemingly indifferent to the vehicle, continued to patrol the edge of the brush. Arun hesitated. Then he opened the door and stepped out. He moved cautiously to the rear of the vehicle, eyes flicking between the trunk and the tiger. Agneban remained at a distance, still in the shade. Arun quickly retrieved the lens, swapped it onto his camera, and fired off a few more shots. Satisfied, he turned to return to the driver's seat. He never made it back. With terrifying speed, Agneban closed the distance in seconds. The first blow came with force like a hammer. His massive paw slammed into Arun's back, hurling him into the side of the vehicle with a sickening metallic thud. He collapsed in the dirt, stunned, barely able to lift his head before the second strike tore across his chest. Arun screamed, reaching for the door handle, but the tiger clamped his jaws around Arun's upper arm, crushing bone and sinew. With one violent yank, Agneban dragged him toward the tree line, Arun's legs kicking up dust as he was hauled across the ground. The duffel bag full of camera gear sat untouched in the front seat. The lens, he had risked everything for, lay in the grass. By the time forest rangers arrived, alerted by security cameras monitoring the zone, Agneban had vanished into foliage. The dense brush hid everything. The only clues were deep gouges in the dirt and a smear of blood leading into the trees. They found Arun's body nearly 40 minutes later, motionless in the undergrowth. The tiger had severed a major artery and crushed his spine. The injuries were instantly fatal. The aftermath was swift and damning. Records showed the tiger had acted aggressively for weeks, yet no action had been taken. The reserve was hit with a massive fine and temporarily shut down. Agneban, deemed too dangerous for the public, was sedated and relocated to a sanctuary in Maharashtra. There, he would live out his years in isolation. For Arun's wife, Molini, who had begged him to be careful, the news arrived like a nightmare. The camera bag came home. The man who carried it did not. The rainforest and the hunter. It was September 15th, 2011, and the Amazon rainforest was alive with heat and silence. The sun beat down through the thick canopy near Manaus, Brazil, casting dancing shadows across the jungle floor. For Carla Mendoza, a 62-year-old wildlife photographer from Sao Paulo, it was just another day in a life spent documenting the untamed. She had chased wild creatures for decades. But today, the jungle chased her back. Carla wasn't a tourist. She was a professional. After earning her degree in environmental photography, she spent 30 years traveling across South America capturing nature's rawest moments. She was no stranger to danger, no stranger to jaguars. But nothing could have prepared her for Luna. Jaguars are built for killing. The largest cats in the Americas, they are silent stalkers, powerful, agile, and precise. Unlike lions or tigers, they don't kill with throat bite. They aim for the skull, one crushing chomp, and the hunt is over. Luna, the jaguar that would change everything, was a female protecting two cubs. In that state, she wasn't just dangerous, she was unstoppable. That afternoon, Carla took her customized Toyota Land Cruiser into a remote sector of the jungle. Her truck had reinforced glass, steel cages, GPS tracking, and satellite communications. Everything she needed to be safe. She was meeting her longtime guide, Paulo Santos, in a clearing known by locals as Jaguar's Haven. A perfect name, as it turned out. By 4:17 p.m., she had reached the site. Her plan was simple. Park near the stream, wait, and photograph any jaguar that came to drink. What she didn't realize was that Luna was already watching. Carla had unknowingly placed herself between the mother jaguar and her hunting path. The air was thick, humid, heavy with tension, and then came the sound. The attack was sudden. At 5:23 p.m., Luna launched herself at the vehicle from the undergrowth. Her body hit the driver's side window with such force that the reinforced glass cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Carla, startled, reached for the keys, but in her panic, forgot the clutch. The engine didn't start. Luna didn't give up. She circled the vehicle like a machine built for one purpose: destruction. She rose on her hind legs and slammed the windows again and again. At 5:27 p.m., the glass finally gave. It exploded inward in a cascade of shards, and Luna's paw came through. Carla barely had time to scream before the jaguar hooked her shoulder and pulled. Her vest shredded like paper. Her body scraped across glass, metal, and jag window frame. Then the jaws found her neck. The bite was brutal and surgical, right at the base of the skull. Luna didn't flail or roar. She didn't have to. One bite, and Carla Mendoza went still. Paulo Santos had been waiting for her check-in. When she didn't radio in by 6 p.m., he alerted the ranger station. At 6:45 p.m., a patrol vehicle found Carla's truck. The window was shattered. Her camera bag was soaked in blood. Her body hung half inside, half out. Dr. Maria Fernandez performed the autopsy the next day. Carla's spine had been severed between the C3 and C4 vertebrae. Instant paralysis. Instant death. Her chest was slashed with deep claw marks. Her throat crushed. She never had a chance. The investigation uncovered a chilling detail. Luna's den, where her cubs rested, was just 100 feet from the clearing. Carla hadn't just intruded. She had crossed an invisible, fatal line. The reaction was swift. New protocols were rolled out across South America. Wildlife photographers were now required to carry emergency beacons, travel only with armed escorts, and use vehicles with regularly inspected armor and safety glass. Carla's death changed an entire industry. Her daughter, Elena, a photographer herself, led the charge for these changes. Local tribes who had worked with Carla for years held a traditional ceremony in her honor. A memorial was built at the edge of Jaguar's Haven, where the jungle swallowed its most devoted witness. Carla Mendoza spent her life giving a voice to nature. But on that day in the Amazon, the wild spoke back. with teeth, a window too far. August 15, 2011. The Serengeti glowed under the African sun. Golden light spilled across the endless plains, bringing the landscape to life with movement. Herds of zebra, gazelle, and prides of lions basking under acacia trees. For the Wilsons, it was a dream realized. Robert and Haley Wilson, along with their daughters Emily and Sarah, had flown in from Portland, Oregon. They weren't the kind of family to do things halfway. This was their first big international vacation. Years in the making, meticulously planned. And this day, a safari through Tanzania's most iconic wildlife reserve, was the centerpiece of it all. Their guide, Daniel Mkapa, had 12 years of flawless service. His Toyota Land Cruiser was custom built. Pop-top roof, elevated seats, reinforced body, everything standard for predator territory. The rules were clear and strict. Never open the windows, never exit the vehicle, and always stay seated. But no amount of warnings could prepare them for what was coming. By 8:15 a.m., they'd already seen a pride of lions lounging in the sun, 2 lionesses and their cubs. The family sat in silence, struck with awe. Cameras clicked, eyes widened. Even little Sarah, only 8, understood how close they were to something wild and ancient. Then they followed the pride. Slowly, respectfully, Daniel kept a 40-yard distance. More safari vehicles joined, forming a semicircle. The lions seemed relaxed, barely glancing at the mechanical parade around them. Cubs wrestled in the dust. Lionesses yawned. Everything felt safe. But Haley wasn't getting the photo she wanted. Her iPhone 4 zoomed in, but the results were underwhelming. Blurry. Distant. She looked around. Other tourists had long-lens DSLRs. Her husband, Robert, was already snapping National Geographic-worthy shots. She felt left behind. That's when she did it. In a quiet, subtle motion, Haley slid open the window next to her seat, just a few inches, to lean out for a better angle. The camera framed the perfect image. The cubs tumbling in the sun. Her finger hovered over the shutter. But the lens wasn't the only thing watching. One of the lionesses had been observing the vehicle the entire time. To her, the Wilsons' car had always been a single shape, a strange but non-threatening box on wheels. But the open window broke the illusion. Now, the lioness saw something else. Movement. Skin. A threat? Maybe. Prey? Possibly. And that was enough. She pounced. In a flash of dust and muscle, the lioness charged, leaping the final distance with terrifying speed. Her paws slammed against the door, claws catching the edge of the open window. Haley had half a second to gasp before powerful jaws closed around her neck. Robert screamed. Emily and Sarah froze in horror. Blood splattered across the dashboard. Daniel hit reverse, slamming the horn. The lioness held on. She tried to drag Haley through the gap, her fangs crushing vertebrae and severing arteries. Jennifer didn't stand a chance. Her phone fell from her hands, still recording. The audio captured everything. The screams, the struggle, the horrifying thud as her body went limp. Robert reached for her, shouting her name. But it was too late. The lioness dropped Haley's lifeless form and slinked back toward the cubs, blood dripping from her muzzle. The attack had lasted only 12 seconds. The first emergency team arrived in under 20 minutes. But nothing could be done. Haley was declared dead on sight. Her neck broken, her carotid arteries severed, and her right arm mangled from defensive wounds. Emily and Sarah had to be sedated before they could be airlifted to the nearest trauma center. The aftermath was brutal. The Serengeti National Park launched a full investigation. Daniel was cleared of any wrongdoing. He had followed every safety protocol, but the incident still sent shockwaves through the industry. Dozens of safari companies reviewed their safety briefings. Window locks were reinforced. Park signs were doubled in size. The lioness who attacked was later euthanized, not out of malice, but because once a predator associates humans with prey, the risk becomes unmanageable. Her cubs were relocated, raised in a separate reserve. Back in Oregon, the Wilson family tried to rebuild, but some wounds don't heal. Emily developed PTSD. Sarah stopped speaking about the trip altogether. Robert never returned to Africa. Haley's death was a tragedy that could have been avoided, but it wasn't, all because of a window opened just a few inches too far. Today, every safari briefing in the Serengeti includes Haley's story. Guides don't tell it to scare tourists. They tell it to protect them, because in the wild, beauty is always balanced by danger, and even a single mistake can shatter a perfect day in an instant. The Mamba Daniel, deep in the heart of Central Africa, the Congo Basin sprawls across 6 nations, its lush rainforest stretching over 1.3 million square miles. This is one of the planet's oldest ecosystems, a humid, shadow-drenched wilderness where survival is dictated by silence, stealth, and instinct. For Daniel Mercer, a 38-year-old British guide, this place wasn't just a job site. It was home. Over 15 years, he had led more than 200 successful expeditions through its depths. Daniel wasn't like the flashy Instagram adventurers who came and went. He was lean, methodical, and revered among peers for his calm, under pressure, and uncanny ability to read the forest. Tourists called him the compass with a heartbeat. In May of 2019, Daniel was preparing for another 10-day expedition, guiding for international clients. 2 wildlife photographers from Germany, a British anthropologist, and an American adventure blogger. The group had signed up for the full experience. No roads, no signals, just raw, unfiltered Congo. The journey began smoothly. They trekked beneath canopies so dense the sun barely pierced through. They camped beneath cathedral-sized kapok trees, sipped boiled river water, and photographed lowland gorillas, crowned cranes, and duiker antelope in their natural habitat. But on day 4, everything changed. The group reached the Lualonga River, a tributary of the Congo. Normally, this would have been routine, but recent rains had raised the river's level. Daniel, cautious as always, spent the morning scouting a crossing point. He found a fallen tree, an old kapok trunk spanning the narrowest part of the channel, wide enough to serve as a natural bridge. Stable, or so it seemed. What he couldn't know was that beneath the tree, hidden in the murk, waited one of Africa's most patient predators, a Nile crocodile, over 15 feet long. Unlike their more visible cousins in East Africa, rainforest crocs are masters of concealment. They don't bask in the open. They don't charge from the water's edge. They wait, and when the moment comes, they explode. This particular croc, known to locals as Mamba Daniel, Daniel's crocodile, was old, scarred, silent, and completely invisible to the group as they approached the crossing. At 2:47 p.m., Daniel tested the fallen log. He stepped lightly, checking for rot. The water beneath was tea-colored, so stained by tannins from decaying vegetation that visibility stopped at the surface. The others waited on the bank, cameras ready. Then it happened. Without sound, without warning, the crocodile launched upward, its jaws clamping down on Daniel's right leg with over 5,000 psi of force, enough to crush steel pipe. The shock was instant. He didn't scream. He couldn't. The croc dragged him in one fluid motion into deeper water. For a moment, there was chaos. Screams from the group, equipment dropped, backpacks tossed. Then silence, just ripples, and red. The river had taken him. What followed next will haunt every survivor forever. The death roll, a spinning maneuver evolved over 200 million years, designed to rip limbs from sockets and drown prey. Underwater, Daniel fought. His hands searched for eyes, nostrils, anything vulnerable, but the Croc's armored body offered no weakness. In less than 30 seconds, Daniel Mercer, one of Africa's finest guides, was gone. The group, now stranded and terrified, activated the emergency beacon Daniel had issued at the start of the trek. They followed every protocol he had taught them, stayed calm, kept together, avoided water's edge. For 2 days, they remained at the riverbank until rescue teams could reach them. When a helicopter finally arrived, there was no body, just a single hiking boot found a mile downstream, its leather punctured by curved conical marks. Clear evidence of what happened. Experts concluded that Daniel's body had likely been dragged into a submerged den, a crocodile pantry, where large prey are stored or rot before being consumed. A brutal but natural behavior. In the wake of his death, the entire expedition industry in the Congo Basin underwent a transformation. New safety regulations were implemented. All guides now carry long-range poles to test crossings. Groups must maintain a 10-meter distance from any water's edge. All expeditions are shadowed by remote tracking beacons. Clients are now briefed on crocodile-specific behavior and escape tactics. But perhaps Daniel's most enduring legacy was human. In his hometown of Bristol, a fund was set up in his name, the Mercer Fund for Wildlife Education, providing scholarships for local Congolese youth to study conservation and guiding. To this day, the section of river where he vanished is called Mambia Daniel, a whispered warning from guides to clients. Never underestimate still water, because in the Congo, still water kills. The final frame, the story of Elliot Grant. The golden plains of the Serengeti are often described as one of the last truly wild frontiers. But for those who spent a lifetime chasing its beauty through the lens, it's not just a destination, it's a calling. Elliot Grant, a 52-year-old wildlife photographer from the UK, had answered that call hundreds of times before. His photographs had graced the covers of National Geographic, BBC Earth, and Wildlife Photographer of the Year. He wasn't just a man with a camera. He was a man with obsession. Predators were his specialty. He had tracked lions on foot, waited hours for elephants to cross dry riverbeds, and once slept in a tree to photograph a leopard den. On May 12, 2022, Elliot was in Tanzania on a solo assignment, hoping to complete a long-dream project, a photographic series documenting the Cape Buffalo, also known as the Black Death. Notoriously aggressive and unpredictable, these massive animals are responsible for more hunter deaths than any other species in Africa. Elliot wanted to capture them differently, not as killers, but as intelligent, complex creatures. Accompanying him was Joseph Makundi, a veteran safari guide with over 2 decades of experience. The two men had worked together before and shared mutual respect. Joseph for Elliot's fearlessness, Elliot for Joseph's instinctive grasp of animal behavior. That morning, the two set out in a modified Land Rover Defender, equipped with camera rigging, extra water, and reinforced body panels. They headed toward a watering hole where buffalo herds were known to graze during the dry season. At 3:43 p.m., they found them, a herd of nearly 60 buffalo, spread across the golden landscape, their shadows long in the setting sun. Elliot's eyes lit up. The light was perfect. The setting was cinematic. Joseph parked the Land Rover at a safe distance, roughly 100 feet, and cut the engine. He reminded Elliot of the rules. No sudden movement, no stepping out of the vehicle, and absolutely no off-path stalking. Elliot nodded. For the next 20 minutes, Elliot snapped frame after frame, adjusting shutter speed, ISO, and lens filters with the fluidity of a master. He captured calves nuzzling mothers, dominant bulls posturing, birds perching on the buffalo's backs. But one shot still eluded him. A full-frontal frame of a solitary bull in profile, raw, proud, defiant. At 4:08 p.m., Elliot made a fateful decision. Without a word, he slowly slid the door open, crouched low, and stepped into the tall grass. Joseph hissed a warning, but Elliot waved him off, pointing at the large bull grazing 40 yards away, his final frame. Joseph cursed under his breath and reached for the radio, prepared to call in backup if needed. But Elliot was already gone, swallowed by grass waist-high and sunlit. What Elliot didn't see, what Joseph couldn't warn him about, was another bull, older, solitary, cast out from the herd. Solitary bulls are different. Their isolation makes them short-tempered. Their trauma makes them dangerous. And this one was watching Elliot. As Elliot crawled forward, inching closer to the herd, he lowered his body to the dirt, propped up his elbows, and adjusted focus. The moment had come. He raised his lens. In that instant, the grass behind him moved. The old bull exploded from its hidden position with terrifying speed. Cape buffalo can run up to 35 miles per hour in short bursts. The distance between predator and man, 30 feet. Elliot heard the snort a split second before impact. He turned, just in time to catch the full force of 1,500 pounds of muscle and horns slamming into his ribcage. The bull's right horn pierced clean through his torso, lifting him off the ground in a motionless arc before slamming him back into the dirt. Joseph jumped from the vehicle, firing warning shots into the air. But the bull wasn't finished. In the wild, Cape buffalo don't just attack. They ensure death. It circled back, snorting, stamping the earth before charging again. It gored Elliot a second time, then trampled him, hove crushing ribs, breaking bone, snapping spine. By the time Joseph reached him, the photographer was unrecognizable, his body broken, his life gone. Later, investigators recovered his camera. The final image was surreal. A perfectly composed frame of the buffalo herd in golden light. And at the very edge of the photo, blurred but unmistakable, was the charging bull. The image would later win posthumous awards. But the cost had been irrevocable. Elliot's daughters, one a marine biologist, the other a documentary filmmaker, flew to Tanzania to collect his remains and his final photographs. His memory card contained over 2,000 frames from that expedition. Joseph, shaken but alive, left guiding 2 months later. Today, Serengeti guides tell Elliot's story to every client. A tale of talent, beauty, and one step too far. A cautionary legend that no image, no matter how perfect, is worth gambling your life on. In the wild, sometimes the lens captures beauty, and sometimes it records your final breath. The Last Defense, the hero Wang, in the heart of Zimbabwe's vast Wang National Park. Danger can be as silent as the wind, covering over 14,600 square kilometers. Wang is home to some of Africa's most powerful predators, and for one man, it became both a workplace and a battleground where instinct met sacrifice. Quinn Swales, 40 years old, had guided walking safaris for over a decade, born and raised in northern Zimbabwe. Quinn's first career was as a commercial pilot, but after years in the skies, he gave it all up to walk the earth, to track lions, study elephants, and lead tourists to the unforgiving beauty of Africa's bush. He was a quiet force of nature, measured, vigilant, and deeply respected by everyone in the guiding community. By 2014, Quinn had become a senior guide at Camp Wang, a rustic luxury lodge that offered guests something rare, the chance to experience Africa on foot, with no vehicle, no barriers. Only the earth, the animals, and the thin line of a guide's judgment. Walking safaris are considered the most intimate and dangerous form of wildlife tourism. Guides must be able to read every track, every broken branch, every subtle shift in animal posture. And if things go wrong, they stand between the wild and the human. On the morning of August 24th, 2015, Quinn arrived early. The day was clear, the air crisp, and he had a group of 6 guests, 2 American couples and 2 German photographers. They sipped coffee as Quinn gave the safety briefing. Walk in single file, stay quiet, and follow his lead. If they encountered predators, do not run. Trust him. At 6:30 a.m., they stepped into the golden bush. Quinn's rifle, a .458 Winchester Magnum, rested lightly on his shoulder. He'd only fired it twice in 12 years. He hoped today wouldn't make it 3. Within the first hour, they tracked zebras, observed kudu, and watched giraffes browsing on acacia leaves. Then Quinn spotted something unusual: fresh lion tracks. Very fresh, large male prints, followed by smaller pads. A pride had passed through not long ago. Quinn recognized the tracks immediately. They belonged to a well-known male lion named Zaha, an 8-year-old territorial alpha, massive, powerful, and bold. Zaha had recently taken over a pride with 2 lionesses and a pair of young cubs. That made him unpredictable. He turned to the group and said, "We've got lions ahead. Stay close. Don't make a sound." At 7:10 a.m., they saw him. Zaha lay sprawled across a termite mound, his golden mane glowing in the morning light. Nearby, the lionesses watched over the cubs as they play-fought in the grass. It was the African dream, until it turned into a nightmare. Quinn positioned the group carefully. They were 98 meters away, downwind, the sun behind them. From this angle, the pride wouldn't see them as a threat, but something was wrong. Zaha stood, not slowly, not lazily. He stood like a soldier bracing for battle. His tail didn't swish, it stiffened. His ears didn't twitch, they pinned. These were signs Quinn had seen only once before. He didn't like what they meant. He whispered, "Stay absolutely still." Then Quinn did something no tourist ever forgets. He stepped forward, just a pace, and fired his bear banger, a loud noisemaker designed to scare predators. Zaha flinched, turned briefly, but then he charged. From 98 meters, a lion can close the distance in under 3 seconds. 400 pounds of apex predator in full sprint. Quinn turned toward the group and yelled the last words anyone would ever hear from him. "Don't move." He leveled his rifle, but there wasn't time to aim. Not properly, not with precision. The lion was already on him. The impact knocked Quinn backward as Nza's massive paw struck his chest. Before the rifle could even fire, the lion's jaws clamped around Quinn's neck. His spine shattered under the pressure. He was dead before he hit the ground. The client stood frozen. A few stepped back, trembling, but they didn't run because Quinn had told them not to, and that single act, his self-sacrifice, saved their lives. Zaha stood over Quinn's body for 30 seconds, not eating, not moving, just asserting dominance. Then he turned and walked back to his pride, disappearing into the golden grass. Emergency teams were called immediately. Rangers reached the site 27 minutes later. There was nothing they could do. Quinn's body was flown out the next morning. His final act of bravery made global headlines, not just because he died, but because he died protecting others. The aftermath was heavy. Zimbabwe's National Parks Authority reviewed all walking safari protocols. Guides were required to carry emergency beacons, and a second armed guide was mandated on all lion track excursions. Quinn's name was etched into the annals of guiding legend. At Camp Wang, a plaque marks the exact place where he fell. Today, tourists still walk that same trail, still photograph lions, still chase that African dream, but they walk a little more carefully. And when guides say, "Stay close," they remember Quinn Swales, the man who gave his life to ensure that others made it back alive. In the wild, few people die heroes, but Quinn did, because in the moment it mattered most, he didn't hesitate. He stood alone between death and his guests. And that's what makes him unforgettable.